You don't have to be a parent to worry about what kids get up to online, but believe me, it certainly helps. The idea of my son perusing the darker corners of the internet without me sitting directly behind him tends to send my heart racing. And little wonder. Pornography, violent imagery, incitement to self-harm, and much more, all available with just the swipe of a screen. Having been given a bit of a push by the court of public opinion, tech companies have instituted some measures, but the Online Safety Act, passed last October, gave new powers to communications watchdog Ofcom, which has just published its draft Children's Safety Code. Robust age checks, improved complaints procedures, a commitment from platforms to take action to tame the algorithms recommending harmful content to children. All sounds very positive, even if it does make you wonder why we weren't doing it before, but some parents remain to be convinced.
This law has been put in place, but there's nothing really changed as such, which is frustrating for us as parents. It's almost like an insult to us as well, because we've put in so much work. I'm
Niall Paterson, and on this edition of the Sky News Daily, we'll be asking if those concerns are valid, or if the internet is about to be made that much safer. Later, we'll be speaking to one online safety expert about the tech firms behind the almost ubiquitous social media platforms on which dangerous content can be viewed. But let's start with a few explanations. Cristina Criddle is technology correspondent for the Financial Times. Cristina, great to have you with us. Just explain exactly what we have heard from Ofcom today and how these, their draft guidelines, how these draft guidelines play into the Online Safety Act.
Ofcom is really laying out what it expects from tech companies now. We have the Online Safety Act that's been years in the making, and now Ofcom is publishing these codes of conduct, which basically says, these are some things we think that you should do, and if you don't do them, you might not be meeting your legal requirement under the Online Safety Act. And these are things like age verification, but also making sure that they're checking their algorithms aren't servicing any harmful material, especially to children. The first time this was proposed was in Theresa May's government. Ofcom has been publishing guidance and different updates over the past few months. But again, this set of codes of conduct have to be consulted on. There's then a process before they become public and then before companies have to comply with them. So I don't think we're going to see Ofcom fining anyone for quite some time. But it's really important that they do this because they have to be legally sound, because if they do want to take a big tech firm to court, they need to make sure that these rules are very robust and can stand up.
So what are the problem areas that were identified by campaigners, by the government, and kind of codified in the Online Safety Act? What are the specific things that these social media platforms, these tech companies, will have to do at some point in the near future?
The core theme is children who are underage should not be on these platforms, and they definitely shouldn't be seeing very harmful content. And then there's a second layer, which is these companies often have algorithms that drive the type of content that you come across, and that these algorithms should not be promoting harmful material, which can often create more engagement. It can make you spend more time on the app. It might make you share things or like them, but it's not necessarily good for children on the platform or even adults on the platform. But specifically on the children, we already have tiers of content that's very harmful, things like pornography. But then there's that lower layer as well. So bullying content or those viral challenges, which can sometimes be quite dangerous.
Walk us through this concept, this term algorithm, because it's almost become a bit of a buzzword these days, and I'm not sure that everyone entirely understands what it means.
Algorithms are technology, usually AI, which goes under what you're seeing. So I'm going to use Instagram as an example, but TikTok has this too, where it basically decides what you're going to see on the platform. And as you use the platform more, it will get a better understanding of the sort of thing you're interested in. So I love cats. My platform are always full with cats. If I click like on a post having a cat, then that algorithm is going to know, okay, she likes cats. I'm going to give her some more. But then it might start to test out different types of content. So it might think, oh, she really likes cats. Why don't we give her a dog and see what happens? And I might like it, then it might give me more dogs. Or if I don't like it, then it will discard that. And so these algorithms learn from our behaviors and then can start to drive what we're seeing to encourage certain behaviors as well.
And presumably this applies in exactly the same way when it comes to the more harmful types of content. You know, I've seen so many stories over the past couple of years about young people seeing self-harm content on platforms like Insta and elsewhere. And I've never come across it myself. Just explain how we get to a position where anyone is receiving content of that type on their devices.
With all due respect, this tends to happen with teenagers and teenage girls in particular who are already potentially feeling quite low or depressed or having issues with their body image. And so they might be engaging with content on there that is about body image. It might be quite innocent and surface level to begin with. It might be somebody in a bikini, or it might be tips on getting healthy. But then as the algorithm realizes you're more interested in that, it might try and show you a more extreme version of that. Now, platforms have gone quite far in trying to make sure that they're not showing very harmful material on their platforms, but stuff is still getting through.
It's the joining of the dots then that happens through the algorithm. So do we have any confidence, though, given how central these algorithms are to these platforms, that, Ofcom, who have been given these powers of enforcement, are going to be able to poke their heads under the bonnet?
At the moment, Ofcom are really relying on these companies to provide them with information. So once these codes of conduct come into force, companies have to conduct risk assessments on their algorithms. So that's giving quite a lot of power to these companies to basically mark their own homework. But what Ofcom can now do is request more and more information. They can really dig into it. And if they suspect something's a little awry, they can open an investigation.
Given that these platforms, of their own volition, have not taken steps to guard young people against this type of content, or not satisfactory steps, according to the government and Ofcom, why on earth would we ever believe that they would be entirely honest when pushed by Ofcom for this type of information? It strikes me that given that they've landed themselves in this position in the first place, we probably shouldn't be trusting them as much as we are.
They are absolutely taking steps. They already have, and this is before the legislation has come into force. But I think when this legislation does come into force, there are quite hefty penalties in terms of financial fines for these companies if they are not complying. But even they have to name a person at the organisation who is personally responsible for anything that goes wrong there. And they can even have criminal liability. So they might even go to jail if this company is found to be flouting the rules on child safety.
I get the point that the tech companies have gone some distance to putting their own house in order, and that is what it is. But the parents aren't happy about it, and it strikes me that the tech companies have only done this because people have pointed out to them that children are seeing harmful material on their platforms.
So often with technologies, you don't know what the impacts are going to be when it's out in the real world. Certainly, we know now, and these tech companies should be doing something about it. But I also think that we as parents, we as users of this technology need to have some agency as well and need to work out, we can control these algorithms. There are things that we can do to make sure we're not seeing this kind of material. And if you're a parent, you really need to be involved in how your child uses these platforms. These companies are trying quite hard to comply. And I also think beyond the sort of financial consequences for not complying, there is a real reputation management issue. And it was once that we thought Facebook, Meta would own the whole social media network space. And that's not the case. We've seen TikTok come up recently and it's been hugely popular. There is room for competitors. And so if you're seen as a platform that isn't looking after children, then you might quite quickly lose your users.
Isn't the genie out the bottle on all of this? That these social media platforms are all pervasive. Everyone has them on their phone, particularly if you are a young person and are engaging in this manner.
There's definitely an argument for that. And I think we're seeing that play out now with AI and all of the hype around AI. These products are often created without fully knowing the consequences, and they are just released to consumers in the wild. Perhaps there should be some intervention earlier. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know when the regulation is going to come into force that causes that, but it's certainly something to think about.
It certainly is. Cristina Criddle, great to talk to you. Thanks for your time. Stay where you are and please don't swipe left. When we return, we'll look a bit more closely at the tech companies themselves and how likely they are to fall into line. Welcome back. The past few years have seen many young people lose their lives or choose to end them because of material found online. And whilst parents would wish to be able to supervise their child's every action online, that clearly isn't possible. So there is considerable merit in getting the tech firms themselves to ensure that kids don't have unfettered access. John Carr is an online safety expert, secretary of a coalition of UK children's charities dealing with internet safety, and has advised the United Nations, the European Union and the British government.
We're the first country in the world to attempt anything this ambitious and this comprehensive. The whole of the world's eyes are now on us. We've got to make sure it works. It's been far too long coming, but we've got it now. I mean, I'm glad it's here. It's a good piece of law, and now we're going to make those tech companies behave better.
John, you're making it sound as if these big tech firms don't have children's safety as their overwhelming priority.
They absolutely do not. If they had, we wouldn't be where we are today having to legislate for it. They only act if they see a threat to the continued profitability or the continued sort of smooth operation of their business. This new piece of law represents that threat, so they are going to have to comply. In Britain, because we're such a big and important and rich market, they will want to stay operational here, and that means complying with the law.
I also wonder what it says about our politicians, that it's taken them this long to realise what's been going on.
Well, on the specific point about pornography, we had a law that Parliament passed in 2017. Mm-hmm. The then regulator, which was the BBFC, brought regulations to Parliament, which Parliament approved. And then at the very last minute, I mean, literally, the week before those new laws were due to go into effect, Boris Johnson pulled the plug on them. And Parliament was very angry, I have to say. Even within the Conservative Party, there was a great deal of anger. But anyway, look, that's old history now. We've got a new piece of legislation. We've got to make it work.
The way in which tech companies look after their products, they don't like people, particularly governments, particularly intelligence services, for example, poking around in the inner workings of their platforms. So I just wonder, when it comes to Ofcom wanting to see action taken on the algorithm, will Ofcom have enough access to be able to ensure that the correct action is being taken?
There are substantial powers in this new legislation to levy significant fines against companies that are found not to be complying with the law. 10% of global revenue, £18 million or 10% of global revenues. But you know what? Fines, schmines. For these big businesses, fines are just part of the cost of doing business. Fines won't do it. But what we've got uniquely in this piece of legislation are criminal sanctions. So what Ofcom will have, and this is the most powerful stick, they have a legal power to request information from these tech companies, and the tech companies are under a legal obligation to answer the questions truthfully, and if they don't, their senior executives will be subject to criminal sanctions. So fines they can pay, criminal sanctions they cannot avoid. And so those transparency powers will work. We will be able to see, the public will be able to see, parents will be able to see, everybody will be able to see what is the truth of what these big tech companies are actually doing to protect children or make the internet safer, better place.
Yeah, I mean, to see one of the masters of the universe from one of the big tech firms, going into prison for something like this, I think that would be very warmly welcomed by, a group that you've already mentioned, the parents. Yeah. You've spoken to an awful lot of them over the years, I'm sure, John, and probably in regards to this draft code of practice. Yeah. It strikes me, and I've seen a comment from some of them, that not everyone thinks this is going far enough.
Yeah. They're impatient, and I understand their impatience, and I'm going to say or do nothing to try to talk them out of feeling frustrated and angry at the way things have turned out. Ofcom have to go through these processes very carefully and deliberately to draw up and describe the rules, or rather how they're going to implement the laws. I'm not yet dismissing Ofcom, absolutely not. They want it to succeed. It's in their professional interest for it to succeed, and I'm sure they'll give it the best go they can. They have to. There are no alternatives. And this is the first time anywhere in the world this approach has been tried. So we all have a big investment in making sure it works. And we'll be holding Ofcom to account. The children's organisations, the parents' organisations are not going to go away.
The tech companies themselves would say, look, we have taken steps of our own volition before any compulsion was placed upon us. I suspect that it has been the outspoken parents of children who have suffered or who have lost their lives that have compelled them to go as far as they have.
I absolutely agree with you. And there's no doubt they have done things. Yeah, they have done odd things. But they've all been marking their own homework. That ship has sailed.
What advice, John, would you give to, let's just say, a kind of a middle-aged white Scotsman who has a small child under the age of 10 who is not getting a mobile phone until he grabs it, pries it from my cold, dead hands, frankly. What advice would you give to someone in that position who frankly, is genuinely really scared about what lies ahead for my child and his activities online?
Kids need to learn about technology. They need to learn how to use it because it's with us forever. Now it's part of the way the modern world works. But parents need to get engaged. But you know what? The companies, we can't put it all on parents. These companies have changed the culture. They've spent billions and billions of pounds, billions and billions of dollars creating a whole new world that's really great in lots of ways, but kids feel they have to be there. They have to be part of it. It's a great way to learn. But when those products are put into their child's hands, be it a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, it should be as safe as it possibly can be at the point of first use. In any other consumer product with any other, like a toaster, a TV, a washing machine, anything that you would buy for use in a family home, it wouldn't be like that because we've had many, many years' experience. We've got rigorous regulations and strong enforcement to make sure that when you take something home with you, when you take something into a family home, it's as safe as it possibly can be. That's the position we need to be in with tech so that when you do give your 10-year-old child a piece of tech, you don't have to fret and worry about being a bad parent. What have I done? What have I missed? Or something of that kind.
John, many thanks. And I should point out that both Snapchat and indeed Meta, which obviously owns Facebook and WhatsApp, well, they say they have extra protections for under 18s and can offer parental tools to control what children can see. Snapchat added it supports the aims of the Online Safety Act. Parents have for decades been telling their kids that they should go outside and kick a ball around to step away from the screen before it rots their brain. And thanks again for that, mother. But for those of us of a certain vintage, it can be difficult to conceive of how much of our kids' lives take place online. And unlike in the past, there is no stepping away from the screen. It goes where they go, and so too the harmful content. Parents can only do so much. The tech companies, well, perhaps they can do much more. That's your lot for this edition of the Sky News Daily. We'll see you again soon.